Joseph tells us in the Pearl of Great Price in the Joseph Smith History, Section 1, verse 51, that there was a hill near Manchester, Ontario County, New York, that was the most elevated in the area. On the west side of the hill, not far from the top, under a stone of considerable size, lay the plates deposited in a stone box. He said the stone was thick and rounding in the middle and the upper side, and thinner towards the edges, so that the middle part was visible above the ground, but the edges all around were covered with earth. He further goes on, after removing the earth, I obtained a lever, which he got fixed under the edge of the stone, and with a little exertion raised it up. I looked in, and there indeed did I behold the plates, the Urim, the Thummim, the breastplate, as stated by the messenger. This website has been developed to once again bring a message to the world in modern times through the messenger of the World Wide Web, declaring to the world that these things are true, and these events did occur just as Joseph has described them to us, knowing that this testimony burns in the hearts of millions of Latter-day Saints all over the world, and is the most important witness to all of us that these things are true. The time has come that the Lord of Heaven will allow us to turn that burning faith into knowledge. The physical evidence that proves the Book of Mormon is an authentic ancient text is enormous, that virtually no one knows about. Let us strengthen our testimony together and set our foot upon the path of knowledge, and fasten it in a sure place upon the gospel path, that we may not be shaken.
I'm in Oakville, New York, and right next to me here is a pretty old tree stump, pretty big. It was probably here when Joseph had the first vision in 1820. Now, where I am is at a spot in Oakville where an Indian burial mound, or fort is the more proper word to use for this, is located. On the edge of the forest, where what's left of it remains, there's a field out this way, and what you're seeing here are very large rocks, hundreds if not thousands of them, and boulders, large and small stones, that I have to assume have been pushed up along this edge of this forest a long time ago by a bulldozer, and it's dirt and stones and boulders mixed. Hopefully the camera can pick these up. They run all along the edge of this field, this forest. I just moved down the hedgerow several yards to an entryway where there's a plaque been put up by the state. I'm showing these stones and boulders again for a very good reason, which we'll talk about in a minute. As you can see here, they're all mixed in with dirt and trees growing up through them, and there's a great deal of hard headstones here that were in the field where the fort was, which was circular, which the farmers pushed out of the field up along this hedgerow so that they could work the land. Traveling along the path here, some more stones, and there's a plaque been put in here by the New York State. Try to see if we can read it, even though it's kind of dark in the woods here. Cast iron plaque. Says Iroquoian fort occupied in early times by the Iroquois Indians. A single palisade fort once stood upon this site, put here by the State Educational Department in 1932. I agree 100% that the Iroquois occupied this site, and they know this from archaeological evidence, as they have done several digs here, and they produced a lot of Iroquois artifacts. However, they don't go very deep when they do this. By law, if you're going to excavate a spot to put a building up in New York State, you only have to go down 18 inches. If there's nothing there, then it's clear for construction. They know, the archaeologists, that they only have to go down a little bit, couple foot, to find all kinds of Iroquois stuff. So they're only going down to between the 12th and the 18th century. My contention is, first off of all, that the Iroquois did not build these forts. And that's why I showed you the stone in the first place, because that has a large bearing on this. We'll walk over this way to where what's left of the ditch is. It's in the woods and it's been preserved. The rest of it out in the field has been destroyed. There were 2 of these forts. The other one's been completely destroyed. And there was another pile in the record, about 50 foot across, about 5 foot high, that all around the edges from erosion was showing human bones. Don't know if that still exists. Nobody does. I'm going down in this ditch here, what's left of it, and it's going to be hard to see because of the vegetation, but I'll put my leg up on the bank here. I don't know if you can see my foot. Right now this ditch that's the bottom of a tree that's at the top of the bank. This ditch is probably only about 5 foot deep. Now, in ancient times when this was created, this would have been much deeper. It's all silted in now. And the history book tells us that DeWitt Clinton, about the same time that Joseph Smith had the first vision, heard about this place. He was interested in where the Indians come from. How did they get on the North American continent? And he came out here with the Seneca Indian chief. And showing the ditch here again. I'm going to go down in the ditch. And he stuck his cane down in the bottom of the ditch and noticed how loomy it was. That's the top of the bank of the ditch on the inside of the fort there where that tree is. And the chief told him they don't very often come here. They reverence the spot and considered it sacred ground because in their legends there was a great battle fought here in hand-to-hand combat long before the Indians knew anything about firearms. And we're talking, according to the Book of Mormon record, about 1,400 years prior to the time of DeWitt Clinton. I'm walking around this thing. It's circular. I know it's hard to see. Again, those trees are in the top of the bank on the inside of the wall. Now, first off of all, the reason why I say the Iroquois didn't build these, there's some more massive stone, you can see it. And the reason why is the Iroquois planted their crops by using a sharp stick to poke it in the ground and put the seed in. They had no plows, they had no draft animals. They had no concept of plowing. The only way fieldstone is removed from the earth is if somebody has draft animals and plows. And the fieldstone is a byproduct of agriculture. And it's a good building product when it's pulled out of the ground, is a nuisance when you're planting crops, to use to make stone walls and to use to make buildings, structures. Now, this is why I say the Iroquois did not build this fort. It's much, much older. The Iroquois inhabited it, I'm sure, after they drove the Nephites out of it. But they did not construct these. Another way in which the early antiquarians knew the Iroquois did not build these is they would find very large post holes, as much as 2 foot around or larger, at where there was gates at these forts. And they know, here's another large stone, they knew that whoever constructed these had to have the use of iron tools to cut down trees of that size, which they used to put where the gates had hung. They'd hang these gigantic wooden gates on them. The Iroquois were Stone Age people with Stone Age tools. They could cut down small trees, very small trees, and they did, to surround their villages with palisade and to construct long houses and other things that they needed. But they did not have the capability of harvesting very large trees. But somebody did. Somebody was harvesting very large trees. This site is very important in that it's one of the few that show the ditch yet, because so many of them are so silted in New York, so covered up by the vegetation from centuries. But this one still shows a little bit of it. and then we're going to go talk about another spot in just a minute. Thank you. Press it?
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Norman Brockenshire, amateur archaeologist and professional truth seeker. The Iroquois Confederacy made up from 5 tribes, each tribe having a duty. The Seneca's duty was to be guardians or keepers of the western door. This doorway or passageway did actually exist in the form of a narrow pass. To find out where, contact NewYorkMounds.org.
Good.
I'm on Bank Street. It's actually was a dirt road when I was a teenager. Has sub pavement now, but it's a limited highway use, seasonal use road. And what I'm showing you is some stone that is still visible above the ground. And I am completely amazed how every year the stone disappears more and more. Now, back in the 70s, when we were teenagers, the remains of this stone wall was highly visible all the way up and down this for 2 miles. And it has not went anywhere. It's still here. It's just becoming more entrenched and entombed every year as the leaves fall off the trees. What's important about this site, what I'm trying to show is, to the east of me here is the Genesee River, which was Lake Genesee in the past. And to the west is the Little Tonawanda, which feeds into the main Tonawanda River. That river was also a lake. It was Lake Tonawanda. And what that did is that caused a narrow strip of ground to exist from North Java, New York, all the way up through to Stafford, New York. This narrow strip of ground was about 2 miles wide, in places much narrower, and about 30 miles long. It's a geological fact that when the lakes existed, that the only way you could get from Pennsylvania or Ohio or the bottom part of the state to Lake Ontario was by using this pass on foot, unless you were using a boat. This pass existed. It's a geological fact. Now, what I found here very interesting is this remains of the stone wall that goes all the way east to the Wacka Creek, which is the furthest arm this side of the Genesee, which feeds the Genesee. And then all the way to the west to the Little Tonawanda. So this stone wall blocked off the travel up through this path, up through this pass, when it was standing. It went from body of water to body of water. And we have this in the scriptures. There are passages that talk about using stone to build things and about blocking off the narrow pass to keep the Lamanites from invading the north countries. Now, the image I'm trying to put in front of everybody, which is on my website, is right here, which is, get that focused, shows Lake Ontario, shows Rochester, shows the Hill Cumorah, shows Batavia where I live, and I am standing where this red line goes up through these 2 bodies of water. This narrow pass existed. I believe it was the narrow pass given in the text of the Book of Mormon, and I believe there are many ways to prove this. It also causes all the places that I have found here where there's high concentrations of both fieldstone on the surface, higher than there should be, and also have been found lots and lots of Hopewell artifacts, which were actually the Nephites. These places are all spatially correct and distance apart from each other, and we are only about 60 miles from the Hill Cumorah itself right here. Thank you.